Diolch Corja, good afternoon to you all, and it's a great pleasure to be here today at the TUI National Congress here in Cork, and I want to thank your President, your General Secretary and the Executive for the invitation to be with you. I genuinely welcome this opportunity to meet and to speak with you for the second year in a row. This provides me with an opportunity to say a personal thank you to you and your membership for all the hard work, the flexibility, the dedication and the cooperation that you continually demonstrate. Recent years have seen our country and our education system repeatedly challenged, and in many ways challenged in ways that we could not have foreseen. The COVID pandemic, people displaced as a result of the war in Europe, the cost of living crisis, cybersecurity threats and the impact that that has had on a number of our institutions. And working together, we've been able to respond to these challenges. I know it hasn't been easy, and I know we're still grappling in many cases with these issues. But when I think about what has been accomplished, I am confident that together we can progress and deliver on a reform of our tertiary education system that benefits the student, the staff member, and indeed the country as a whole. I also have to say, and it is important I acknowledge at your Congress, that the TUI remains a pragmatic and constructive partner as we work together to build a third level education system that suits the learner. Together, we've established 5 new technological universities. Only a few years ago, there were none. Together, we've created new pathways to university education, and I'll return to that in a moment. And while we have much more to do, we have worked and are working together to change the system. And I want to talk to you a little bit today about what more I think we need to do. We all know that further and higher education is of crucial importance in helping to advance our country's wider interests, our economic interests, our social interests, our environmental agendas. And the message that I'm hearing from you and your executive time and time again is that while we share many of the same aims, there is a need for real and meaningful investment in this sector. I couldn't agree more, but I do have to say to conference today that some of that additional money is now already flowing. If we take the National Training Fund and my department's vote together, there's an additional 513 million committed to the Department of Further and Higher Education, Research, Innovation and Science this year than last year. This is a 14% increase, and it brings funding for our sector to over €4 billion. In addition, I'm pleased to say that I've secured additional money for capital investment with €270 million available this year. And let's not forget, we were coming from an extraordinarily low base. Before my department was established, before I became minister, there wasn't a dedicated capital budget for further education and training. Teachers, principals and others were having to argue to try and get a bit of funding to fix the leaky roof or to fix the broken toilet. We've now moved to a point where further and higher education and training is getting the same level of capital funding as our higher education system is, and we're beginning to be able to plan for massive capital projects together in a way that simply wasn't imaginable only a few years ago. And I absolutely know, and I know very clearly, that we all want more and we all need more in terms of investment, and we'll work together to make this happen. But these are big numbers in terms of investment, and I do hope they demonstrate real commitment from myself and my department to our sector, and I know they'll have meaningful impact on the ground. For example, €32 million has now been set aside in direct response to demographic pressures in higher education. It's absolutely essential that as we fix core funding, we don't allow a new hole to develop as more students come into the system. So this means that we're now investing 25% more for every new student in higher education, €8,245 per year per student, compared to €6,500 per year per student in previous years. Funding the Future promises that an identified funding gap of €307 million will be closed, in addition to that demographic funding that I've just spoken about, and the first tranche of €40 million was available to us this year. The vast bulk of this money is being used to increase staffing levels and to strengthen the student experience and to provide for additional structural management, research and support staff posts in our technological universities. Let me be clear on an issue that I know is extremely close to your heart. This year is the first year in a long number of years that we will see a reduction in the staff to student ratio as a result of this extra investment. And let me also emphasise that I have made it crystal clear to university presidents that ending precarious employment is a key condition of any additional investment. And the additional money for 2023 is being divided equally between traditional and technological university sectors, with both receiving the exact same amount of the pie. So given the very first opportunity that I had to show parity of esteem between the TUs and the traditional universities, I've taken it, and we're going to keep on building in that regard. There will be no poor relations when it comes to the third level system. And we went further. When it came to ring-fencing capital projects, the only projects that we ring-fenced capital funding for outside of competitive processes were the technological universities. And that has meant we've been able to, for example, purchase the iconic Waterford Crystal site, a site that has laid idle, a site that has been derelict, a site that used to represent so much in terms of prosperity and employment and has now become a blight on the landscape of the Southeast. We've bought that for the Southeast Technological University, so we can expand the footprint of that university, and I give you that as an example, and there's much more to come. You get the TU agenda. In many ways, the TU agenda derives from your work, from your advocacy, from your campaigning, from your passion over many years, and you understand that what we're trying to do in creating a new model of higher education in this country, thanks to your efforts, and thanks to the votes of your members in ballots right across the country, we've managed in a relatively short period of time to radically transform the landscape, moving from 14 institutes of technology to 5 TUs and 2 institutes of technology, and I'll return to them in a moment. The challenge now is for us to remain committed to the vision that drove that change. But let me also be very clear. TUs are a new kind of institution with a specific role to play in higher education. I don't want to see any TU, morph into a traditional university or try to become the new UCD Light or the UCC. That's not what they're meant to do. I want distinctive TUs and a differentiated range of institutions. And that's just not my view. The law of the land is clear. The legislation spells it out. The mission of our TUs is very clear. It's about skills development. It's about regional access, moving beyond having to get the road to the big city to get to a university. It's about working with enterprise, and it's about access and inclusion. And of course, our TUs can, and they do, and they will reach beyond the region to contribute and lead both nationally and internationally. But the point is that the TU sector should complement and collaborate with other HE institutions, not compete with them. In short, I want to see a unified sector, not a uniform one. And in that spirit, I want to assure all of you today that Dundalk IT and IADT Dún Laoghaire will not be forgotten and will not be left behind. I recently met with TUI reps on this very issue, and what I felt we had a very useful and constructive discussion. I've said it on many occasions that it's not for me as minister to instruct any institution to follow a particular organisational path. That would be illegal. That's not what I can do. But at the same time, I don't intend to shirk my responsibilities either, because it's absolutely important that I and my department and the HEA support DKIT, support IADT, and support your members. And that is what we're doing. And as the future strategic direction of these institutes evolves, there should be no doubt that we will assist them to the greatest extent possible to make progress. And let me be really clear at the TUI Annual Congress that any funding required to make this happen will be forthcoming, and I cannot be any clearer on that. Alongside all of the developments in higher education, we absolutely cannot lose sight of the ambitious reform agenda underway in further education and training. Many of you here will know my views, because I do talk about it a lot, about the national obsession with the points race and the pressure that the CAO system puts on young people. I've been in 80 secondary schools over the last 12 months, and I can see that stress and that strain etched on the faces of Leaving Cert students, and often on the faces of the teachers as well. Teachers talk to me about Leaving Cert reform, and they say to me, but when are we going to have the discussion about actually pathways to get into university, pathways for third level, and not just reform of the Leaving Cert? I get that, and you are right. We need to create ways outside of the point system to help young men and women, and not so young men and women, get to where they want to get to in life. You could have, thank you. You could have 2 students sitting in school today, and many of you will know this, and they're sitting side by side in class, and they both want to be a nurse. One student does really well in the Leaving Cert, gets the points, and off they go and they become a nurse, and fair play to them, and that's good. The other student doesn't do as well in the exam, doesn't get the points, but might have actually made a better nurse. And at the moment, that student leaves our country, leaves our health service, and leaves their family. That's got to change. So what we've got to do is radical on one level and simple on another. We've got to get our traditional universities, our technological universities, and our further education and training systems working together and not in silos. We've got to take a holistic view of the higher and further education sector, and we've got to work towards that unified tertiary system. So we've established a new National Tertiary Office. Their job now is to develop joint further education and higher education programs. And I'm delighted that for the very first time this September, we will see the rollout of 14 programs, 14 degree programs outside of the point system, outside of the CAO system. And this will guarantee you from September that if you get a place on one of these courses, and subject to getting the exams and getting where you need to get to in further education, you won't go into a lottery that you might get a place if you're lucky in university. You'll be guaranteed that place. And you'll be able to start a degree program in further education and then conclude it in higher education. There are 5 clusters of ETBs and higher education institutions that have come together. Many of you know this because many of you have been involved in this on a local level, and I thank you for it. So to just take one example, a student could complete a first year of computing course in Laois Offaly ETB and then a guaranteed route and place in the South East Technological University to finish the degree. Here in Cork, for example, you'll be able to commence a degree programme in Cork ETB and finish the degree programme in MTU Cork. Learners can do 2 years in sustainability, performing arts, computer science and finance as part of this new model of learning. And as I've said, the area I'm most excited about is the area of nursing, because as part of this model, starting in September, students will be able to do 1 year in their ETB college in Letterkenny, Castlebar or Sligo, and then transition to their nearest ATU campus to finish the degree programme. This does have the potential to be transformational for our country and for our health service, because every year, students in further education who get the highest marks possible in further education have to take the next Ryanair flight to help build up the workforce of the NHS. This stops now. These new programs will help stem the tide. They'll ensure we train our workforce and they'll ensure we keep them here. But we're just beginning. Let me be clear. It's 14 programs. It's just a start. But it's important. It's a mind shift. It's a cultural change. It's proof of concept. It's showing that we can do things differently in terms of our education system and that we can move beyond the obsession with the points race. And you can be sure that as we learn lessons from these first programs, we're going to expand our offering. And we'll be coming to you and working with you, as you said to me very clearly when we met recently, to seek your expertise on how best to develop these initiatives, on how best to roll this out, and how best to embed this across our education system. The key to bringing a unified tertiary sector into existence is that we need people to work together, to come out from behind the walls of the university and out from saying that's the job of the university, that's the job of the ETB, and actually say it's everybody's job to help the learner, and that the learner can't take a step wrong or put a foot wrong no matter which way they go. This collaboration needs to be underpinned by parity of esteem and mutual respect across the sector. ETBs have a long-standing and proud tradition in equipping learners, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds, with labour market skills and with a sense of belonging. The sector does not always receive the recognition it deserves, and this policy is a vital step in recognising the distinct missions and strengths of each sector as an essential part of our overall third-level system in Ireland. There's also much scope for more collaboration across the system when it comes to strengthening the practice of teaching and learning. But the bottom line is simple. We've got to put the learner at the centre of the system, and we've got to develop a variety of pathways, well-defined and innovative learning pathways that moves that focus to a better place. We'll soon be taking this plan on the road. We'll be engaging with stakeholders, and the TUI and your members will be absolutely crucial to this conversation. Of course, none of this would be or will be possible without investment in our staff. And I know that when we talk about capacity in the sector, we're really talking about supporting you to deliver. It's my firm belief that staff are the bedrock on which our education system depends. As such, I'm acutely aware of the serious concerns that have been raised by TUI and others about the impact of low pay, precarious working and student-staff ratios. I hear you clearly on this, and I understand that these issues are not only of concern to individuals in their daily lives, but they're also even more than that. They're of systemic importance if we're to recruit and retain people and continue to deliver a high-quality education system to students. My officials and I are listening, and I've already highlighted increased investment that will support institutions in moving away from an over-reliance on short-term contracts. There can be no excuse for any institution as it receives more money to hire more staff as to why they're not putting people on proper long-term contracts. And we will be monitoring this very closely. There's also been considerable work done to overhaul the employment control framework with the aim of eliminating perverse incentives to rely on short-term contracts. While this reform has been worked through, we have secured a considerable uplift in the upper recruitment limit this year, with an extra 1,150 posts provided for, bringing the ceiling to over 22,000 across our sector. Reform of the ECF and additional investment will combine to help bring Ireland more in line with our European peers in terms of staff-student ratios. And as I've said, this year we will start to see the improvements in the ratios, and we need to build on that in the next budget. I also know, and I've heard it from meeting your executive, that there are particular concerns among TUI members about other specific issues. One relates to researchers at TUs having access to the single pension scheme. I completely agree with you that they should, and my officials are working with colleagues in the Department of Public Expenditure to get that in place. They tell me this is a complex matter and it is admittedly taking some time to resolve, and I understand your frustration. However, I can assure you that we are working to bring this to a satisfactory resolution as soon as possible. I also know that you're focused on the pay of over 3,300 adult education tutors employed across our country. And being honest, this is a source of great frustration for me too. It needs to be sorted. It needs to be sorted now. Today, I'm pleased to confirm we finally have movement and we have progress. I've received the green light to table a proposal this week to resolve the matter once and for all. I'm sorry it's taken so long, but today we move forward and treat our adult tutors with the respect, the dignity and the certainty that they need and require. Every day we work to remove the stigma attached to people seeking help for their learning needs. That sense of shame somebody feels if they can't read, if they can't write, if they don't have digital skills, that shame's not theirs, it's ours. These were people who were not afforded the right opportunity. And we're going to do it. When government ministers, including myself, when we go abroad and we promote this country and we do it proudly, we talk about a knowledge-based economy, we talk about a well-educated workforce, and all of that is true. But you know what else is true? We live in a country where 1 in 5 adults struggle to read. We live in a country where 1 in 4 adults would struggle to understand numbers on a bill, and where 1 in 2 of us lack basic digital skills. We cannot allow people to be locked out of full societal and economic participation, and that's why the work of our national literacy strategy is so important. That's why appointing regional literacy coordinators in every ETB in Ireland, as we've done, is important, and it's why resolving this issue in relation to our adult education tutors is also really important, because every day we've got to work to remove that stigma. The terms and conditions offered to AETs were not acceptable. We have made some progress already with the introduction of a consistent method for awarding contracts of indefinite duration and access to leave schemes, paid leave, and access to the appropriate public sector pension scheme. But I am pleased now that my officials are here today. They'll be liaising directly with your leadership team to discuss the proposals that I've received sanction for, and we will announce further details in the coming days. Of course, one of the most important issues for many of you is the development of a new fit-for-purpose career structure for academic staff in technological universities. This in turn will require a new and groundbreaking type of academic contract. The contract must ensure that staff are facilitated, encouraged and rewarded for the many and varied roles that you fulfil. The contract must create enhanced terms and conditions for a structure of education, research and engagement career pathways that maximise the potential of every individual academic staff member. This is how we will retain and recruit talent, and it's how we'll enable our TUs to deliver on their full potential. You may know, last December, I brought the OECD report on academic career paths, contract and organisation in Ireland to Cabinet. Since then, my officials have been engaging intensively with counterparts in the Department of Public Expenditure, and I hope to be able to return to Cabinet seeking approval for a range of measures, including the establishment of new associate professor and professor grades. But there's an awful lot of work to do before we reach that stage, and I wanted to be here at your Congress today to absolutely assure you that the TUI will be comprehensively consulted in the relevant discussions, and there will be absolutely no imposition of any new contract or new terms and conditions. We want an agreed, collaborative working through of the necessary steps for bringing new structures into TUs in order to cement their central role in delivering and transforming our higher education landscape. Before I conclude, I do want to touch on the reason we all do what we do. It's the reason I do what I do. And that is to make sure that we can improve access to education for vulnerable learners and for people with disabilities. As I've already said, the focus has to shift away from conversations about institutions and programs to the individual learner and the prospective learner. And I know we all agree on this. Wherever and whenever a learner enters our education system, no matter what stage of their life they're at, they need to be guided and they need to be supported. If you've entered a higher education degree and realise that it's not for you or not for you at this moment in time, you need to be easily able to transfer to a further education college. You need to be able to feel that the education door hasn't shut to you. If you decide to return to education after many years of caring for your family, you have to be able to re-enter the education system to pursue the course of your choice, irrespective of level. And this requires financial support for the learner being made available through the student grant scheme. And my department is currently working with colleagues across the sector to define the parameters of such scheme. But we need to make sure that you can access the SUSI grant scheme for part-time education if we're to truly make sure every learner can actually access education. But one of the reasons that I ended up in the role that I was in was because I was frustrated to live in a country where too many people with a disability were locked out of or blocked out of access to education. And you and your members, through your work and through your advocacy and working with successive governments, we've made a lot of progress as a country. A lot more to do, but we've made a lot of progress. But let's also be honest. There's still far too many students with a disability who face a cliff edge when they leave second-level education. I've sat in rooms with mothers with kids with Down syndrome as the mother has cried and said, not only do I not see my child progress like you or others do, I have to watch them regress in front of my eyes because of the cliff edge that they face in relation to third-level education. This has to change. We've made a lot of strides in primary education, a lot of strides in secondary education, and of course more to do. But I'm not going to shirk my responsibility when it comes to addressing the cliff edge that is third-level education. Last year at your conference, I talked to you about new supports I was going to put in place in higher education. How for the very first time we were going to provide universities with funding for universal design to make their campuses accessible, and how we were going to provide universities with an ability to roll out programs for students with an intellectual disability. Well, today I'm pleased to be here with a further announcement, because today I'm announcing that we're going to extend supports for persons with a disability right across further education. The fund for students with a disability will be extended to all students with disabilities in 2024, and this means all learners. At the moment, if you're doing a post-leaving cert course, you can draw down the funding. But if you're doing an apprenticeship, you can't. If you're doing a traineeship, you can't. Or if you're doing many other elements of further education and training, you can't. So we're going to make sure that every single learner in further education can access the fund for students with disabilities and the personal assistance that go with it. I believe this will take another step towards removing that cliff edge for many vulnerable learners. In addition, we have to move beyond being able to point and saying, they're doing a good job over there. Isn't that a great program that they have in Trinity? Or isn't that a great program that they have in that ETB? We've got to start embedding this. This has to just become a normal part of our education system, not something that we pat ourselves in the back if we do it right in one place. And to do that, we're now going to also ensure that every ETB in Ireland will be set a minimum percentage of their budget to deploy on learner support services right across further education and training, and have centralised learner support services. Our education system can be rigid, and people with disabilities can miss out on learning and therefore miss out on employment opportunities, not because they lack any ability, but because the system often lacks an ability to understand them. We're not going to solve this overnight, but we can't delay, and today we take another important step forward. So today, I want to thank you for the work that you're doing. I want to thank you for the support and the expertise that you provide me, and the advocacy and the keeping the pressure on me that I'd expect the TUI to do over the course of the last 2 years and in the days, weeks and months ahead. I've said it numerous times before in numerous addresses, but education is the greatest leveller. We all know that. It's for all types of individuals, all families, and it's not just for the sector itself that we pull together all of the different strands to create an inclusive, unified system that's good for students, that works for staff. It can't be done without you. It is you who do it, and I look forward to working with you, my open door policy continuing, and to continuing our journey in the year ahead. Gyr Míle Mágaibh.